Hello and welcome to another Loco Works Wednesday. So last week we showed you how to repair Dapol wagons. Basically we had some problems with the couplings, and we basically used a pair of electronics tweezers to essentially reattach the couplings, and it's not a very difficult job. It takes a couple of minutes. And we also had a problem with the paint coming off some of their weathered products. In particular, we had some paint peeling in and around this kind of extruding detail on these milk tankers, and we got around that problem basically by weathering it. So one of the things I wanted to do this week was to show you how you can actually enhance the Dapol wagons. So you can see here I have a selection of Dapol wagons that have loads in them. So for example, you can see here this red ICI wagon has I believe some sort of, it says Saltworks, but it kind of looks more like it's got coal in it. You also have this weathered version with the ICI, and you can see there when they weather the top of them, it actually looks pretty good, so don't really need to make any changes to the weathered ones. However, on the unweathered ones, as you can see here, it's really hit or miss with these loads. Some of them, they look okay, some of them are a little too shiny. My biggest pet peeve with them is that they don't quite have the right texture to them, so they kind of sometimes look a little cartoonish, although they don't look as bad on the camera here than they do in real life. So they don't look too bad at all looking through the camera, but once you look at it here, you can sort of see it doesn't look very realistic. Probably the worst ones are the ones that aren't black. So here, this is some iron ore, and it just doesn't quite look right. Now, the nice thing with the Dapol wagons is that because it has these loads in it, you can fill them and kind of improve the top of them without having to use tons of sort of Woodland Scenic's ballast or whatever you're filling it with. So what we're going to do today is basically show you how to enhance these with some products. So what you're going to need are a couple of things. One, you're going to need a decent paintbrush. Now I'm actually using an epoxy brush. I had a lot of these left around from an epoxying project, so I'm going to use one of these. I'm also going to use some PVA glue. This is Elmer's school glue, and basically we're going to use the brush here to apply it. For the coal loads, I'm using two types of Woodland Scenics. Got a fine coal, and then a slightly larger sort of coal product as well, and we're going to basically sprinkle those on top. For the iron ore, I've got Woodland Scenic's ballast iron ore. It's very red, but it looks more or less the right kind of color. I'm also going to use some weathering powders. I'm going to use the AIM Grimy Black weathering powder to fill things in. You could also use the ballast, but this I think is going to work a little bit better. Alright, so the first thing you want to do is just do a quick bit of research. So you want to take a look at the running numbers that are on this. This is M620248. This is 7-5 here, INT. And basically what you're going to do is just do a quick Google and make sure that the load and the color load that's in it is what you'd actually expect to see in the wagon. Obviously here, the NCB one, you're going to expect to see coal, and that's what's in there, so that's alright. Likewise with the iron ore, it says it's got iron ore in it, so you're good to go there. So what we're going to do next is basically start off by simply applying the glue. I'm going to do it to one of them that I have quite a few of, which is this one right here. So you want to use the glue fairly sparingly. So I'm going to take the glue and just sort of run a slight strip down the center, and then what we're going to do is just take the brush and brush the glue all over the coal load. Now if you find that you don't have enough glue, you can always apply a little more. You don't want to apply too much though. You want to try to keep the glue inside the wagon. You don't want to get the sides of the wagon or anything like that. And so here we need a little bit more, so I'm just running a very thin line of it down like that, and then just slowly using the brush work it in. And just keep in mind, wherever you put the glue is where the product is going to stick, and this is a fairly slow drying glue, so it's easy enough to work out mistakes. Do keep in mind that this is covered in glue, so you want to set it slightly raised off to the side, and then what we're going to do is basically apply some of the coal product. The trick with this is to use it very sparingly, and in fact here you can see I have quite a lot of it sitting already in the bag. So what I'm going to do is just sprinkle it onto the top like so, and that should be enough. And then what I'm going to do is get a second brush and then just brush this in very carefully. Okay, so I've got another brush here, and I'm simply just going to move it over the surface like so, and just get it so that it's completely covering the entire wagon into all the locations where I've put the glue. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is just set that aside for a moment, and I'm going to go get another wagon, and I'm going to basically do the same thing. I'm going to get the glue here, and I'm going to run it back and forth. I'm putting a little bit more on here because I know exactly how much it took to do the other one, and then we're just going to brush it in place like this and make sure we get as much of this as we possibly can, and we want to make sure we get it. It's okay if you overrun the side a little bit too. It'll just glue it in place and maybe add to the weathering of the thing. So again, we've got that. We set the brush aside. Now what I'm going to do is take the previous wagon I just dumped this stuff on, and just slowly sort of sprinkle it over the wagon like so. And you can sort of see here it's got a pretty nice effect that we've done on that. So we're going to set that aside, and then we're going to get our brush that we used earlier and then just brush that in place like so. So you could of course use a thicker or more coarse set of coal. So like we have a coarser coal here, I think, and we could use that as well. But for this particular part of the project, I'm just going to use this, and basically what we're trying to do is get it so that it looks just a little bit more realistic, and it's looking pretty good. Alright, so what we're going to do next is show you a couple of other techniques you can use with just like maybe the weathering powders to dull this down. So to do that, what we're going to do is set this one aside, and you'll be able to compare the two. So here's another one of these wagons, and what we're going to do is take the glue and just run it. We're going to use a slightly thinner amount of the glue this time, and I'll explain why in just a second. Basically, what we want to do is just get as much of the surface here covered in glue, but we want to kind of highlight the surface, which is what we're going to do with the weathering powders. And it's just going to slightly change the texture of the thing, and it'll make it look just a little bit better. Alright, so with that done with that, we're just going to go ahead and take the black, Hornby black weathering powder, and this is a little bit different than what we normally do with weathering powders, because we do not want to get the container weathering powder is messed up with glue, so we're just going to sort of sprinkle on a very sparingly amount that we think we'll use, like so. And if I'm wrong or I need more, I'll have to just kind of sprinkle it on there. So now I'm going to take the brush that I used the coal for, which already has glue on it, and sort of just paint the weathering powder into place here. And what this should do is highlight the original kind of texture and so on, and without actually changing it too much, or at least that's what we hope happens. You know what you do is basically just tip it off like that, and you will have to wait for the glue to dry to get the full effect. Because right now it's pretty wet, and you want to avoid doing too many brush strokes as well, because you don't want to mess it up too much. Alright, so we're going to let that dry, and then we'll show you the end result with the two different techniques. But you can see there, if I sort of compare them, you should be able to see the difference between all three. So if I take the same wagon, it'll be the easiest way to do it. So that's the original wagon. Actually, let me make it easier. So this one here is the original wagon. It looks pretty okay. This one beside it, on this side, has the weathering powders, and it's a bit shiny. It'll dry out though, pretty bland. And then this here is the one with the actual cool product in it as well. So that's basically it for adding those different cool techniques. So what we're going to do next, maybe if I bring it a little closer to the camera, you can sort of see the difference. What we're going to do next is basically show you the iron ore approach. You can see there, it just looks that little bit more realistic. I personally prefer the coal technique here. It just looks a little bit better. Although sometimes I might use slightly larger pieces of coal just to make it look a little bit more varied. Alright, so on to the iron ore. Now when you have one of these, and it is of course missing some of its couplings, but we'll show you the same, pretty much the same technique. So first of all, we're going to put the glue in place. Now this is a little trickier because this particular load is actually raised up a little bit, so we just have to be a little more careful when we apply the glue, that we don't get it too much of it on the sides of the wagon. You see there, it gets pretty close. And what you do though is because it's raised, you do want to get it all the way across the surface of the load itself. Now you may be able to knock these loads out. I've done it a few times, but I found that it produces a much better finish if you just sort of do it in place. Of course, since I'm using glue, you're more than likely not going to be able to get the load out once it dries, so that's another thing to keep in mind. So what we're going to do next is use this iron ore, and this is the iron ore ballast from Woodland Scenics. I'm going to get a scissors here and just basically snip the corner of it. So you just tap it like so, and then just do a 45-degree angle, And that will give you a nice sort of what we're going to do is basically just sprinkle it. I'll try to do it this way, and of course my effort of sprinkling it basically is pour it all out at once. A little too much there in the box, but it's alright. I'll clean this up in a second. So what we're going to do is basically just shake it. See that? And so I'm going to pick up the ballast here and just sort of sprinkle it over some of the surfaces where it hasn't quite stuck down, like so. Now you can of course spray this as well if you want to do that, but basically what we're aiming for is less of a mess if we can do it, and get that sort of texture on there. So I'm just taking the weathering powder brush here and sort of just kind of very gently just getting rid of some of the stuff off the edge that doesn't need to be there. And you see there what I did was I basically just used my finger to clean off the edge here. Now if you expose any of the glue, you can just sprinkle it. It will be very fine, like so. Basically what you just want to do is you want to avoid it looking like somebody's put sprinkles on it or something like that. So there you have it. That's the kind of final looking product, and you can see it looks a lot less cartoonish and looks got that more realistic texture going on, and obviously it's the right color as well, being the iron ore ballast. Alright. Okay, so you can see here I've applied the glue again to this one. This time though I've taken a wagon where I've used a slightly larger coal load, and I'm just going to basically tip it upside down. You can see there it does produce a fairly nice effect. I'm going to just take my finger and run it along the edge just to clean off any bits that just makes it look like it's not that realistic. So you can see there, this is the larger coal, and it's a little bit nicer than the others, but still pretty good. You can compare it there to the smaller coal, and you can go bigger again. I know they have larger coal loads, and these are all Woodland Scenics. But I think this is probably the best one, so we're going to just do the rest with this one. So what we're going to do next is just sort of sprinkle that in place, and I've got hopefully a better handle on the sprinkling thing now, compared with the iron ore fiasco we had a few minutes ago. Now this stuff's a little easier to sprinkle because it's bigger, and you kind of want to avoid using too much of it. You can sort of shake it like this, and it'll level out. This stuff is not cheap. I know it's a good couple of dollars for a bag of it, maybe like 12 or 13. So you don't want to waste it if you can avoid it. So again, what I'm doing here is going to go and take this NCB wagon this time and pour a thin bead of glue on top of it like so, and I'll pick it up and show you in the camera here. I'm just going to work the glue like I have with all the other ones, just like this. And you just want to make sure you get the glue perfectly on the load. And like I said before, you can lock these loads out, but it's just easier, and you end up with slightly, personally I think you end up with a better result with it in there. So you can see there's enough glue on it to make it wet and shiny. And what we're going to do next is just take the cold load that we had earlier, and you literally just want to hold it at a 45-degree angle like so, and then just sort of shake it like you would salt on your fish and chips or whatever. You can see there, obviously there's not enough. It's just, this is the last one I'm doing. I just want to make sure that it's used sparingly here, so I'm going to just carefully pour it on like so. And since this is the last one, what you can do is sort of just tap it around, and you will notice that there's a few spots where you're going to need to pour more on it. You just want to cover up the white of the glue. Now this is PVA glue, so it will dry transparent, so if you miss it, it's not that big of a deal. And then, like I said with the previous ones, just take your finger and run it through there. You don't want to sort of pat it down too much, but what you're aiming for is just to kind of clean off the edge a little bit, so that there's not like some pieces sticking out, because usually when these things are in motion, any kind of loose bits on the edge would have fallen off before the train got moving out of the depot. Alright, so that is it. One thing I will show you is I did take a few minutes to weather the clay wagon there, so you can see it does look a little better weathered, and the coloring is a little bit better with the non-cartoonish looking load now. You saw earlier the coal loads, so we've got these 3 coal loads here. We've got the slightly smaller coal load here, and then we got the other technique where I just used the weathering powders. It hasn't quite dried yet, but you can see there it just adds that texture to it and makes it look a little bit nicer. Alright, so this is a very easy technique, very easy to do, and the end result is pretty nice. Like I said, I prefer the slightly larger coal, but like I said, there's a wide variety of it available from Midland Scenics. Comes in bags like this, so it's worth picking up. Alright, so that's it for this Workshop Wednesday. Kind of followed on from last week's, where we showed you how to repair the Dapol wagons, so I thought it was only fair to show you some enhancements you can do to these Dapol wagons as well. I'm going to do the same thing and some weathering as the other NCB ones that I have, and I might do the same thing to the Lime and a few other ones. But that's it for today, so hope you enjoyed this Loco Works Wednesday. Actually came out on a Wednesday for a different change, and until next time.